Jaspre Guest, and I'm really excited to be coming to you live from the Mental Health Coalition's Instagram page for their one-to-one series. Today is International Friendship Day, and I'm really excited to have my friend Brittany Snow join me. Brittany is an actress, an activist in the mental health space for over a decade, and I couldn't be more excited and honored to be her co-founder in September Letters. So let's get Brittany on. We're here for the one-to-one conversation, which we're both so excited to be part of.
Yes, definitely. I've been a fan of Mental Health Coalition for a while, and I've been looking at their lives and their conversations, and it's been really interesting about how many people are speaking out about their mental health and being honest and sharing their stories. It's really, it's definitely time. Yeah,
it's amazing. I mean, I think, and you were really one of the first people to speak about mental health, which is always so inspiring for me as your friend and as your co-founder, but on all the things. And I think people are really getting to a place, like, is that exciting for you now that people are talking about it more openly?
I think it's just really incredible because the young teenager that was kind of looking for this sort of thing and scouring magazines and trying to get online, which by the way was not really online back then. It was like,
oh my God, remember that?
I do. But yeah, that girl who was looking for other people to share their stories, it was hard because there wasn't a lot of people being really honest back then about mental health, about depression, anxiety, things of that nature. And I think it's really incredible now that there's such a plethora of people who have been really honest. And I think that those teenagers and people in their 20s now have a resource and some sort of connection to people and some sort of hope, because we're all so much more similar than we even realize.
And I think you and I spoke about this a lot. Like, friendship to us means a lot of different things, but I think at the crux of it, it means connection, you know? And I think that connection really inspired why we started September Letters in the first place.
Yeah, I think that friendship is kind of one of those words that, when I even put this on my Instagram, like, you automatically assume that it means Care Bears and rainbows and everybody's gonna go skipping off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Which if you and your friend are into that, that's great. But I think also friendship means a lot of different things. It means self-acceptance. It means having some sort of self-care within how you take care of yourself, how you take care of others. And you can have a connection and a friendship to so many different things. And I really think that it's valuing those friendships and those relationships that is really important right now, because what we've learned in the past year and a half is that connection is now more important than ever. We really, I think a lot of us took for granted maybe that in the past, and now we're like, any sort of connection, whether it's physical or emotional, even a great conversation, it's just so much more valued.
I think that's such a good point, right? Because a lot of the physical part has been taken away, so everyone had to get really creative. And I think even like phone calls, which were not happening as much, like people started picking up the phone and doing check-ins on texts and really just like checking in on friends. And obviously letter writing became a big thing again, and postcards, and just feeling like you had some sort of connection with someone somewhere.
Definitely. And I think that's why September Letters has been really incredible for us, is taking a very simple idea of connection and writing to yourself, writing to someone else, writing to a friend, or just simply writing to get it out, and then having that be that sort of connective tissue that brings us together, and we can read the same letters that other people have written, but also you can forward on letters. And that sort of community, I think, is really important, especially now, because you need to feel like you're not alone, that all of us have something that we're going through, not even struggling with, but something that we have to overcome. And that journey and that story is so important to share, because it makes us feel united in whatever we're going through.
Yeah, and I think the letters that we get, on a daily basis have really been so beautiful for you and I to read. And I feel even closer to everyone. And I also feel like I see my story and other people's stories, which is the whole, circular moment of September Letters. And and how that's really been amplified in such a weird time. Like, I think, you know, I'm so grateful for you. Like, you've helped me through some really hard times, and we haven't really been physically together for a long time, you know, but yet we've been working closely, and you've helped me through some really hard, difficult moments throughout the couple of years.
I mean, same for you with me, or me with you. I guess it's both. We both went through a really interesting year, and not necessarily having to do with anything pandemic related.
No.
I think that life just happens, and it is really important to have friendships, but also I think we're really good examples of the fact that you don't necessarily need to be physically there with someone to feel like they are there for you. Um, and I know that, you know, both you and I have talked about the fact that, like, at certain times we haven't had like 50 friends around us all the time. And I think that it's really important to note that sometimes you just need one person, just one, you know, really a person that's selfless enough to just listen. And I think that that is huge. And when you have that one person, or hopefully, you know, it's two or three, it really makes a huge difference. But I think that that doesn't necessarily have to be sitting down and having coffee and talking. I think it can be
Absolutely.
writing a letter, a postcard, a conversation, or even, you know, in my case, a text message just saying, hey, I'm thinking about you, and I just want to know how your day is.
And I think that, you know, is so powerful. I think people underestimate, you know, that we all might look okay, but what is really going inside, maybe we are not okay, and it's okay to not be okay. And I think it's also so important just to reach out, and, you know, when I'd get a text from you, or I would text you and just say like, hey, thinking of you, sending love, sending support, like that is so incredibly meaningful and can really just help people. So I think, you know, I would encourage everyone to reach out to someone maybe they haven't spoken to in a while, and they just want to check in, and there's nothing that they need in return. Like, I text friends all the time, and I don't expect a response. It's just to show that I'm thinking about them and their support. Because I feel like right now, during the times that we're in, like every little piece of support and connection is helpful.
Yeah, and just to know that you have someone on the other side, and
Yeah.
like I was saying, not necessarily needing anything from them, but it makes you feel better too, to just reach out, even if it's not about you, just to know that there's some sort of human connection on the other side. Yeah, I think right now what we're seeing in the world, and with so many people, even, you know, I'm seeing in these comments, I think it's really, really beautiful that so many people are being very honest about their mental health and wanting to
Yes.
share. Because, you know, back when I came out with my story in 2008, yikes, there wasn't a lot of support, and there wasn't not necessarily support. There was support, but there wasn't a lot of understanding of why.
But support from the world, you mean?
Yeah, I guess it just seemed vulnerable or self-serving, or, and I think a lot of people went through that when they wanted to share their honesty, because it kind of seemed like you were maybe asking for attention. And I think that mental health in general, that's something that I can't wait for us to all as a society get over, that this is not dramatic. This is something that a lot of people actually struggle with, like a physical illness, and that we should take care and consideration just as much as if someone broke their leg or someone was going.
We say that a lot. We say that you and I say that a lot. You know, mental health is physical health, and vice versa. And this kind of leads me into like my favorite story that you always tell, that I've heard many times, but every time I get a little teary. I would love to talk a little bit about the September Letters origin story, and like why we think, you know, connection is important, and why we came up with September Letters.
Yeah, so September Letters was kind of always one of those things that I had in the back of my mind, because when I was a teenager, like I was saying earlier, I was kind of scouring the web and media for some sort of feeling like I had some idea of what I was going through. There wasn't necessarily a name for it in my mind, because I hadn't even heard of what I was doing. I was anxious. I was doing weird things with numbers and eating and fitness stuff. And I was obsessed with fitness magazines. And in one of the fitness magazines that I so religiously subscribe to, there was an article about a woman who was overcoming an anxiety disorder and an eating disorder and all these different things. But she really described it so beautifully, where it had nothing to do with exercise or nothing to do with food. It really had to do with her mental health, and it had to do with things and traumatic experiences that she was trying to overcome. And it was the first time that I realized that I wasn't just being weird with numbers and things and places and food. It was actually something much deeper than that. So I carried it around in my back pocket for about 2 months, just as a realization that there was some sort of hope. And many years later, I want to say like 10 or 11 years later, I did an article for People magazine, and I wrote about that article that changed my life. And I kind of alluded to the fact that I was in recovery, and I've gone through all these mental health sort of ups and downs, and I've, gratefully in such a better place. And I wrote it in an article, and I went to Coffee Bean a couple weeks after the article came out, and there was a girl who was standing in front of me, and she turned around and she pulled out the article that I had written in her back pocket, saying that had helped her get through a really hard time.
So amazing.
And in that moment, I was like, okay, that's just way too weird to not do anything with. And the synchronicity of all that really makes you believe that those are the moments you have to believe in connection and believe that we need to share our stories, because even in that really fearful moment of being vulnerable and being honest with mine, I was helping somebody, even one person who was standing in front of me. So September Letters kind of grew from that, where the idea is if you share your story, you might just help one person.
Such a beautiful story, and it's a story that never gets old for me, and I'm just so honored and grateful to be part of September Letters, because it is such a special community, and everything that you've been doing is just really amazing. I feel like now would be a good time to try to get Dr. Janis, right?
Yes, because we are not mental health experts.
We are not. Clearly not. We can't even barely work the iPhone, but let's see.
Yeah, let's get an expert on here.
Let's get the expert. I don't see her, but
oh my gosh, I don't know why anyone let us do this. also
wait, I see her. Here we go. It's happening. I did it. All right. Dr. Janis is a senior advisor at the JED Foundation, and she is dedicated to bridging science, practice, and lived experience. Hi, Dr. Janis.
How are you?
We're good. How are you? Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. It's great to listen to your conversation. It's so interesting. You touch on so many important things.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Yeah. So I guess I was thinking there were so many thoughts going through my head as you guys were talking, but one of the things that came up is just by virtue of the difference of our ages, and I was born well before the turn of the century. So I watched the journey, the collective mental health journey happening. And I have to say, I know that it feels for a lot of people like we're just arriving, and in some ways we really are, but boy, you guys, we've come a really long way. I mean, back when I was young I graduated from high school in 1984. You were talking about emotion wasn't even really like that acceptable. You weren't really supposed to do that at work. There were like these very rigid divides right where that was acceptable, and even with whom that was acceptable. So the fact that we're here live talking to each other about things that are authentic, that are real, boy, it is really a testimony for me of how far we actually have. A lot of those walls have broken down, and a lot of even the scientific understanding of what drives humans, what drives human motivation, what drives human sense of well-being has converged on the role of mental health. And if you unpack that, a lot of it has to do with how we feel going through the day, who we're feel in those connections. So it's been really fun to sort of watch that come together, and gratifying, because I know as a person, as a woman, as a scholar, that it's really, really important, and we're finally having the conversation. And I'm so grateful that you guys have created space for that to happen, and not just here, but like with September Letters. So thank you.
I mean, I think that also the great thing is that we can't think about it too macro and I try not to, because I think if that were the case, my mind would explode. So I think what we're trying to do, and tell me if this is wrong, I guess, but is to just really try to connect with one person or help one person or do very small things, you know, day by day to make yourself or someone else feel better. Because, you know, we can't change the world. We can't change the stigma that is surrounding mental health, or the generational sort of um the I guess the generational sort of like stigma that comes with talking about your emotions, and that is so tied to different family dynamics and where people come from. But I think if you're just trying to be, you know, your own champion and do what's right for you and tell your story because you feel like it's right, then it'll help someone else as well.
COVID drove us inside in so many ways, both physically as well as inside ourselves and inside our own skins. So we all got to spend more time there, whether we were comfortable or not, but being able to reach out to each other, I think has made an enormous difference in how we've all gone through this and what we've taken away from it.
I mean, I think that's so true. I think that not only was it really a hard sort of year and a half with connection in terms of other people, but I think that we really learned how to sit with ourselves and just be our own best friend, which I think a lot of people are used to going to the next thing, going to the next place,
Right.
having the next experience. And so, yeah, it's like kind of chasing that sort of high of like not having to really deal with what you're feeling and thinking. And this really made us realize that we're stuck with ourselves forever. And we have to get through this. We have to get through this now, and just by sitting and being your own friend.
That's so it. And you know that the it's just so clear that once we know how to be our own friends, we're much better friends to other people, because mostly because when our friend is suffering, we're not afraid to go there with them because we know what it feels like inside, and it's not a scary inside space. If it's a really scary inside space, it becomes hard to join a friend in their hard space. And the only way to like not be scared of our inside spaces is to spend time there. But in the modern world, it's really, you know, there's so many distractions. It's very easy not to do that. So I think COVID was very much I don't want to say a gift, but it kind of was in that way. It really, yeah, somebody just wrote, I found lockdown good because I learned a lot about myself. I hear that a lot. I think we did learn a lot more about each other and ourselves, especially ourselves.
Definitely. And that's where writing comes into play in terms of not only, you know, journaling, which I know you know a lot about, but with September letters, letter writing, my question is, you know, for me, sometimes I get overwhelmed with the idea of journaling because I just think it has to be perfect, it has to be beautiful, and if I'm not going to do a lot of it and really get to it, then why would I want to do it at all? I'm a very black and white person. And so what's the advice that you give for people with letter writing in terms of, or journaling, that makes it more manageable and they can kind of wrap their head around?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. Journaling is, as you said, it's actually really, really powerful. It's one of the best ways to kind of bring the stuff that's inside outside. Just a plug for journaling quickly before I tell you about the how. And that is that one of the things I consistently found is you may think that you're gonna, that you know what you're gonna say when you start saying it, however you say it, but you really only know the first, like, maybe paragraph. And then as you keep going, now you guys have probably both had this experience, as you keep going, there's stuff that comes up that you just didn't quite realize was there if you're just letting it flow. So that's one of the reasons why allowing yourself to journal just for yourself, especially at first, you don't necessarily have to journal with the intention of depositing it in September letters, but just write for yourself and write however you want to write. It is actually, there's some really good health benefits of using your hand and like using a pen and paper. It facilitates brain function in a really different way than typing. So if you can, but I know like my daughter and son cannot write really with their hands very much anymore. They prefer to type. So if you need to type, go for it. Or sometimes the way I journal is to do it through my phone. I'll just do an audio recording, and that works too. and I'll save it. And, I know there's programs that can translate it if I want that at some point. So it doesn't matter how you journal. The thing that, so find a way that's you think is going to be comfortable, and be creative, and write for yourself at the beginning, or just speak for yourself at the beginning. And then the other thing that's helpful is if you do it about the same time every day, or you say, I'm going to commit to journaling a few times a week. It's helpful if you have a little ritual around it. So it's like maybe the same time or day roughly, or, you get your coffee and you sit outside and you journal, or however it is you do it, that's good. So regularity is helpful. And in a system that feels really good for you. And then the last thing I'll say now is just free associate. Please, the most important piece of advice is don't journal with an agenda, and don't self-censor when you journal. Just let whatever comes up come out, even if it makes no sense at the moment. Because one of the things you'll notice if you do this for a while, and then you go back and look across time, is you'll see things that you definitely didn't see in the moment. There's just things that you learn about yourself, your life, and patterns that are unfolding that you kind of miss in the moment, especially if you're self-censoring. So those are 3 easy pieces of advice that I'll give on that one.
That's so interesting, because I would think that you have to write. It's interesting that you can do it digitally. You
Sure.
can do a voice note. You can, type it into your phone. I mean, I'm a big doodler, and I have 8,000 notebooks, and I write everything in my notebook, journal in the notebook. But I think that that's a great tip for some people who feel like they can't write and they want to do it on their phone. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, no, and you can draw it too. I mean, some people are really not very comfortable with the written word all the time. And so you can draw it out too. I mean, it does help to have narrative that goes along with it, just so that you can kind of remember what was going through your mind. But if it's hard to start that way, then I would say just doodle, just do art. Yeah, and use color, but allow the self-expression to really be blossomed fully.
And I loved what you said about the, taking your coffee out and sitting outside. There's such a awareness that comes with journaling and writing, because you're doing it, and it's taking that moment for yourself. It's
Right.
taking a break from your brain for a second, and just doing something for self-care reasons, instead of it being something that you have to get to. And I think that a lot of us, that's meditation in a way. I can't meditate. I try all the time. I want to be a meditator. I do the thing. I sit in the mat. I do the whatever. and I can't. I have to tangibly do something in order for my brain to, get to a level where I can just sit. And I think that journaling is my meditation in a way, because I just kind of let my brain go.
That is journaling can be a form of meditation, and especially if you build a little bit of ritual around it that says to you, it signals to yourself, this is an important moment. So whether it's going outside and being near your favorite tree, or sitting in your favorite chair, or having, you the ritual of getting coffee or something else to drink, but setting aside time, dedicated time. I'll say, for the next half hour, this is the time that I'm going to do this, and nothing else gets to interrupt me. If you're not using your phone to journal, which I would kind of discourage, because as we all know, it gets very distracting. I would really recommend having your phone not be too don't even have it be in the room, or at least saying, I'm not even going to check my phone for 15 minutes, so that you can really, and ideally the whole time, so you can really drop into what you're feeling. And I think maybe the most important thing, if you can get this far, is if hard stuff starts to come up, let it come. Don't back away. That's the wrong time, even though you'll want to put down your pen or whatever it is you're using and walk away from it because it feels uncomfortable. The very best thing to do is just let it come. And if you can give it words or shapes, or I don't know, anything that it can do to come out, you will be amazed at how less scary it is once it has just shown up and come out. It's like negative things wants to live too, but once they've lived, they don't need to live like that forever.
Oh, I love that.
I love that.
In your brain, you make these monsters and these mountains.
Totally.
And they just become these things, and you don't even know that you're necessarily doing that. But then it becomes one thought becomes the next thought becomes the next. And in order to just put it out there and see it in front of you, you realize that it's much more simple than you realized. Because I think your brain wants to control the narrative and make yourself feel better. Like, it's like, well, if I can make sense of this in my mind, then I can make sense of my whole life if I just like really think about it. But then when you write it down, you're actually realizing, wow, they were just having a bad day. They weren't mad at me at all.
That is so true. That is so true. And so much of like the darkest thoughts that come up, like somebody just asked about suicidal thoughts. A lot of times they're sitting, that's the surface that's sitting on a whole boatload of other thoughts that have never been able to be articulated. They could be thoughts, they could be memories, they could be associations, they could just be narratives that aren't even necessarily anchored in some sort of material truth, but they haven't come up and out, and they need a space to do that. And we always recommend that you have a safe space to have some of that stuff come up, like with a therapist or somebody who can really create a space where you feel safe. So I really recommend that. I also saw somebody said saying that I cry it out. I've been thinking about crying a lot recently because I've noticed in my own experience, I don't know about you guys. I'm a pretty good crier. If I really need to cry, I'm like, okay, just let it come.
We're big criers over here.
Big criers.
We're big criers.
Big fan.
So you probably notice that, like, once you start crying, the feelings come, but then there's more. Like, at least for me, if it's a really good cry, if there's a big, deep thing that it's connected to, there's a part of me that's crying and having the deep feeling. There's a part of me that's like, wow, look at all this whole range of associations and memories and people and times. And it's like a whole story gets told in my crying. And I'm like, everybody should do this, because there's things that come up when I'm crying that I don't otherwise see sometimes. It's really helpful as a therapeutic tool, actually. And as a journaling tool.
That's so important what you said, is like, just do whatever feels good to you. Because I think sometimes people get like, I can't journal because I can't do A, B, C, D. And it's really not about that. And if you cry, that's a form of release as well. And I think that's something that I've learned, that I've tailored it to what I can actually handle and what I can actually do that's going to make me feel better, versus having the anxiety of like, oh my God, I'm not doing it right, or I need to do it like this. And so I've really just kind of applied that to my whole life, and it's made everything more enjoyable.
And then, if you cry and you can then capture some of that in a journal, it's not a bad time after you've had a really good cry to journal. And then just record what you got, record what you saw, what you felt, how it felt. Because almost inevitably, if it's a big, deep cry, I think there's usually stuff that you might not have seen in exactly that same way.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so you can really capture some of the down deep stuff that way.
I'm trying to turn on my brightness. Sorry to interrupt. I was just wondering, another thing that's kind of like come up on here, and actually was something I was thinking about too, is there's sometimes those stages of grief where you don't cry, or not even with grief, but with everyday sort of things that come up, and you realize, why am I not crying? Especially me, as a person who's insanely sensitive. Sometimes I don't cry, and then I get scared, like, what has happened? Have I become a robot? And I think it's really important to kind of understand that there's so many different ways to deal with things like that and trauma, and it's not necessarily one sort of thing for everyone. Because I think that there's so many different ways to deal with it. Someone said to go out into nature, and I feel like that's really been lovely during COVID, to like start really looking at things around you, things that we took for granted. That was really helpful to me too.
Yeah, nature has a unique ability to unlock stuff in us because we are of her. I know we don't feel like it, and we kind of lock ourselves away, but we have a lot in common with nature. And you see there's actual physiological changes in the body when people spend time in nature in ways that are really, really helpful. So if you have nature around you at all, like one of my practices where I am now, because I have a lot of nature around me, is to make sure I get out every day, because it just helps me ground, and it helps me come into contact with my feelings. And I just let myself, sometimes I'm like, all right, so how am I doing? It's like my check-in place and space. There's something else you said, Brittany, that was really, I wanted to latch onto. I can't remember. Maybe it'll come back in a minute.
Oh, the crying, not crying.
Not crying, yes,
crying.
And trauma. Right. So sometimes things are kind of buried deep in there. If you think of it like a thorn, you know how sometimes you get a thorn or a splinter, and it can get pretty deeply embedded. And it takes a while. I don't know if you guys have had this, but I've had like splinters that are really bad, and it can take a while to kind of come up to the surface, and and you like, oh wow, and then you see the bigness of the thickness of it, and there's some blood. I think trauma and hard experiences are sometimes like that. They can be down so deep, and it takes a while for them to come up to the top, and it's slow. So you might become aware of it cognitively before you're emotionally ready to really be with it. And so you may not actually cry or emote strongly as it's kind of working its way up. But that's one of those things, if you're journaling, you might notice that it's like literally kind of working its way to the top through your journaling. And eventually you'll probably be able to touch the emotions of it. But you won't do that until you feel safe.
Right. And then to go into like a September letters connected question, I guess, but also just, I'm curious, how important is it, or is it important at all, to share what you've written with other people? Or is it really just for yourself? Or is it more helpful to share it with a trusted friend or anonymously share? Or does it really just differ?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the person. So that's where, like, knowing yourself is really helpful. And of course, the reaction also matters. Like so people will probably, I think there are a lot more people who will write something really personal and then they put it out in the world for people to see, usually through social media in some way. If the reaction is really supportive and positive, it can make all the difference in the world. You can feel like you're all that aloneness you've been feeling, you don't feel it, at least for a little while, or you have that existential sense of connection to everybody and everything for a little while. And that can be really, really good. If you put it out there and there's a negative reaction, even if it's a couple, and it really, maybe it triggers something for you, a sense of not mattering or a sense of shame or whatever it is, then that can be really, really hard. So I would really encourage, I think September letters, you guys, it's a really well designed so that I think you minimized any potential negative impact. And the people who share, I'm sure, I can't imagine they don't feel pretty certain that sharing is going to be a good thing for them, because there is something cathartic about being seen, like having not just my beautiful self be seen, but having the hard stuff in myself be seen. That can feel really, really good to kind of get it out. And you have provided a really great platform for that. So
thanks. I hope so. I think, and also it's on September letters, we make sure that you don't have to leave your name. There's not, you don't even have to leave your full name. It can be your first name or it can be anonymous. But really what we found our favorite sort of aspects of September letters is that you can request a letter and request help from someone. And the community of people who have responded to people's requests have been reignited my love of humanity, to be honest, because everyone is very gracious and respectful, and they preface things with this, experience might be different, but this is how I got through, and I'm here to offer you some hope. And seeing that sort of community has been really, really beautiful to see. But I think that has been really important, is that aspect of sharing your story, that you don't necessarily have to tell everyone everything and give it to the world and make yourself known. It's baby steps, it's one thing at a time, or you can just read the letters and not have to share at all.
Yeah. And the other thing you guys touched on that is really important is giving. So it's really good for humans to know themselves, for them to share, to know their inner landscape, to be able to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, all that sort of stuff. But it's also really, really healthy and good for us in all the ways that feel good and are just fundamentally physically and mentally good to give. So when we give back to people, either through emotional support or tangible things that we give to them, somebody's suffering or having a hard time, you bring them soup, things like that are really, really, really good for our mental health. And so that's the other thing about, what you just said that's powerful, which is you created an opportunity for people to be givers and not just to bring their vulnerability. They bring their strength and their capacity for human generosity and not just their vulnerability. That's really powerful.
I think the pay it forward concept is so important to us, and that's really like the origin story of what Brittany said of someone read a letter, they felt the connection, it helped them, you know, move forward in their life. And that's what we're seeing with the community. It's so incredible to be a part of, because I think, you know, Brittany and I I've always just tried to help people. Like, how can we help more people? And I think letter writing is just a small, simple way that you can start, you know, with helping yourself, and in turn helping yourself, you're helping someone else. And that's
Absolutely
what's really been, you know, special and unique about that project.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you guys, it's also, you're helping in more than just a tangible way, which is also helpful, but you're helping people become their more authentic, discover and embody their most authentic selves. I mean, I don't know what higher calling there is than that. I mean, obviously this is what I love, so I'm kind of biased, but I have noticed, the academic in me says that I've noticed that what we from in society is of those bonds. So when we are able to exchange in authentic ways from our most authentic selves, then, you know, we thrive in society, other people thrive and society thrives. When all we're doing is transactional, when we're just sort of transacting, then in ways that don't involve those parts of us, then we look a lot of the way we look at the moment. And so we're learning, right? We're learning what really matters in making life worth living for not just us, but other people too.
Sorry, there's construction, of course, right now.
Well, I think it's a beautiful place to end, actually, because no one can say anything better than that, you know?
Okay.
It's hard to top that, you know?
Good. All right. Well, it's been so great to be here with you guys. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for everything that you said and for this conversation. I got chills a couple times because it's just so important to talk about. And I feel like we all as a community can feel better if we share these sort of insights together. And it's been really nice to talk about.
Thank you so much for coming on with us.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. Thank you guys for using your life, energy, and resources to make the world a better place. It matters.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, same to you. You're doing the same thing.
Yep, that's right. Yep, all three of us. And everybody watching. So I hope they all take something and go do something good for themselves and others.
And please, everyone, go to Mental Health Coalition website to go to the resource pages to get some more information about how to get help or help others. And go to septemberletters.com to write a letter, read a letter, request a letter, and just feel better and connected. And yeah, the Jed Foundation as well. Great resource. Love you guys for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just happy that we can all be in this together.
We are. Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.